Hi everyone and welcome back to the multiverse of 100 plus data science project series. In this video, you're going to be creating here a AI research assistant using Python and large language model. So without wasting your time, let us start our tutorial right now. Let's have a look about the data flow summary. So the application that you're going to build first is taking here an input topic from the user. It can be the topic about the AI, it can be the topics about the 5G internet, any kind of topic you can give it to here. And then you need to generating here an base prompt because you know that the large language model is working based on the prompt. And after that, we basically creating here functions called the arcs underscore Groq. And again, using here the Groq Cloud API. So using this one, you can basically accessing here the free and open source large language model like Llama, or you can also access the DeepSeek RL model. So this is the first Groq API call. You can see the first Groq API call. This is the first time we just calling here the API. And after that, we have one initial report, how you basically calling here these functions and how you basically give the prompt, base prompt. And after that, it will enhancement the prompt with some initial report. You can see enhancement prompt with some initial report. And after that, calling here this Groq API functions again. You can see Groq API call and number two. It's been that we basically calling here the Groq API two times. And then we got one enhanced report. And after that, we show the output in the consoles. So in our summary, you see that we basically calling here our Groq API two times. See, this time and also this time. Two times we basically calling this out to basically for enhancement prompt with the initial report that you can see on here. Okay. Now let's see what are the module and the purpose of the use of that. Okay. So those are the module that you're basically using it here. First module is called the operating system that you can see OS. So using the one, we can basically access the environment variable. So our environment variable is nothing but .env file. Where you basically storing here our environmental variable. So you can give it to here environmental variable called Groq API key. So here we basically storing here our API key that we copied from the Groq cloud. Okay. So used with os.getEnv, we passing here our environmental variable name. Let's call it Groq underscore API underscore key to sequentially load the API key from here. Okay, without any hesitations. Then to using here this async operations basically for the asyncio. So it's basically for the provide the asynchronous execution because we're calling the Groq API two times. Okay, so subsequently we need to calling here this API two times. That's why you need to using here this async operations so that we can also wait for our next movement, right? So it's provide here the asynchronous executions. It's run the async functions like ask Groq. You can see also the generate prompt with some asyncio.run. Okay. And then we have our module called the Groq. It's nothing but the official Groq client library. It's done by the Groq. And it basically handling the communications with the Groq large language model API that you can basically access from the Groq cloud. And the .env, it's important so that you can loading here the environmental variable from the .env file that you already told about that. We have a string, the variable name called Groq underscore API underscore key. So using this .env, we basically load the environmental variable from a .env file into our Python environment because we're going to be using here the Python programming language. Super simple, nothing fancy on here. So if I see this again, you can see that you have the user input topic, then generate base prompt, then you have a function called arcs underscore Groq, and this is the API call number one. And after that, we got here one initial report. Then we do the enhancement prompt with the initial report. And then you calling here the arcs Groq function again. This is the API call number two. And again, we got in here an enhanced report. Okay. And then you show the console output. Okay. And you can see module and the purposes. Now let's see the code. Okay. So what I can do, let's go on the VS code that you can see. And I already opened this code here. We have our task.py file, and then we have the main.py file, as well as you can see and template folder. So here we basically storing here our the UI sections. Okay. So first you see the raw code without using the Flux, and after that it's simply going to implement it in our Flux. Okay. So first you can see that we actually imported here some of the module that's called import OS. It's basically for the file creations, and then the asyncio, you know that for asynchronous operations. And from Groq we import here the Groq, and also from .env we import here the load.env so that we can actually accessing here our Groq API. So first you need to actually calling here this method that's called load underscore .env, And then you can see here you can easily access it using here os.got.env, and you give it here Groq API key. If I see this .env file, you can see here the Groq API key, as well as you can see I passed here my Groq API key. So I just collect it for the Groq cloud. So it's better you can just go on the Groq cloud and try to see which are the model is basically available. All right, so this is the Groq Cloud workspace that you can see on here. Just go on the Google and search for the Groq Cloud and sign up with your Gmail account. So you can see you can give it the system access, or you can also ask the questions. Okay, now let's go on the docs, and then after that you can see the models. You can use any kind of model from here. Let's say Llama 3.3 17 million versatile. You can use any of the model because the production model, the PB model as well. So you can access the API key just clicking on this button, and you can get in here your API key. Okay, now let's go on the code, and I'm simply going to give it to the model name as Llama 3.3 17 million versatile. This model I'm going to paste it here. Okay. Now you can see that we basically creating here the functions called the ask Groq that we discuss on here. Let's say async operations, async daf the ask Groq, which one is taking here and prompt. It's basically our base prompt, and after that it will taking here an API key in the from strings. Okay, that you can see on here. Then after that, you need creating here a client, because you know that Groq is basically the official client library that is submitted. I mean that is provided by the Groq itself. So let's try, and client is equal to Groq API key, and then we basically creating here a chat completions. So let's say client dot chat completion dot create, and we passing here the message. So we passing here two types of message. One is a system message, another one is a user message. Now this system message is basically you just give it here some kind of prompt. I mean, you can just give it here some kind of role-based informations. Okay, so let's say you are a research assistant that write details well cited research report that you can see on here. Okay, and role is basically users, and it have the content, and you the content you're passing in the prompt itself that is coming from the parameters. Okay, then model we give it to here Llama 3.3 17 million versatile, as well as we response it here response.choice of index number 0, because it maybe give you 5 or 6 responses, and you're taking the first index one, which needs to have the high accuracy, and the message dot contain. Okay, and if it have any kind of exceptions, we just say that Groq API error, this kind of error or this kind of extension, you can actually set it on here. Okay, now we need to creating here another variable for generating the reports. I mean, it's basically for the prompt. So async daf generate prompt, which is taking here the topics and the API key also. Okay, now we have our base prompt that you can see. So generate a detailed research paper research report on the topic that you provided. So the report should include an introductions, background and context, current state of research and technology, key finding or insights, case study or examples, future directions or trend, reference. You can see it's also important. Event simulated ones are okay. Okay, you can give it to any kind of that. Okay, so make it suitable for academic or professional readers. Okay, yeah, readers. And after that, this is the base prompt. This is the base prompt, and then you have one initial report where you can give it to here this base prompt to your Groq API. It will give you one kind of report. So you need to wait for that, because we calling here the API for the two times, and you also using here this async methods. You can say async method. Then you need to actually keep here one keyword called await, and then we calling here this method called ask Groq. Okay, and we passing here our base prompt and also the API key that's coming from here. Okay, because we need to passing here the API key to our ask Groq, and then we need to enhancement the prompt. You can see enhancement prompt. It's basically the purpose of that. It's basically for polishing your data. Okay, polishing your reports more. Okay, and then you can see that we have our enhancement prompt. So here is an initial research topic, research report on. You can it's basically give the first Groq API call. It's basically give you one initial report, initial research report. Now you have to do the enhancement. So enhance it by adding more technical details and examples, improving clarity and depth, simulating the visual sequence, describe the chart or infographic if it is have, then suggesting some practical applications. Okay, it's implications, sorry, implications, and keeping academic tones. Okay, so that you can follow. So return only the enhancement report, and enhanced report equal to the same thing, await ask Groq. It's mean that first we getting here our result, and after that we polish it. Okay, then you can see on here. Okay, super simple, nothing fancy, but here you can learn one thing, that how can you basically using here these async operations as well as how can you calling here the API key for the two times. Okay, that's the main catch on here. Okay, so you can see the entry point. If the name is equal to main, then we're simply going to give it topics. So if the topic is not provided, so topic is required, and as well as the Groq API key is not found here, then and then we simply going to using here the asyncio.run and we calling here this generate report because we using here the function as a async function. You can see async function. That's why. Okay. So let's say asyncio.run and we calling here our generate report and we passing here the topic and the Groq API key. That's it. Okay. Now let's save it. Now I am simply going to running it here. Let's say run Python file. But before that, it is selecting here a Python version, which is greater than 3.8, or you may choose my Python version 3.12 itself. Okay, let's choose this. So here is it, my Python version 3.12, and now it initializing. You can see Python 3.12. Now I can simply going to go into here and I can run in the Python file. Okay, so that you can see it running these applications in here. Okay, let to wait for a few seconds and let also give it to here one topics. Okay, so enter your research topic. So let's give it here topic. The role of artificial intelligence in modern healthcare system. I just give it to here. Now let's wait for the output, what we basically got. So need to waiting for a few minutes or a few seconds to getting the output. Okay. And after that, we simply implement it in our Flux applications. Okay. Okay, you can see that we got our response. So you can see on here the table one, you can see architecture of CDSS, the component and the descriptions, data ingestions, the data processing, data visualizations. You can see the medical image analysis, key finding of insight, as well as you can see case study and examples, IBM Watson Health, that is very important, Google DeepMind Health. Okay, you can see on here, and improve patients outcome. This the practical implications, and then the future directions of the trend, as well as you can see some of the reference. Okay, you can see some of the papers reference, which is good for the researcher actually. Okay, now what I can do is simply going to see our main.py file. So this is nothing but the file. Here we basically have our applications. Okay, I mean our Flux applications. So let's try to first running this out and try to see the UI. So let's click on run Python file, and it will run in these applications in the local server. I mean the local host 127.0.0.1.5000 like that. Okay, so you can click on here, and now let's click on follow link. Okay, now let's wait for that. It is basically loading. So you can see here AI research assistant. You can see the enter your Groq API key to give it to your Groq API key. So we can also add it to here. Okay, we can also add here the Groq API key that we do in here like that. So let's try to changing this UI, and I will back again. So all right, we do changes in our main.py file. We basically loading here the .env so that you can actually accessing here the Groq API key. I just added here these two lines, and after that I also change the code in our UI sections because we need to crop the Groq API key sections. Okay, so now let's go on here the main.py file. Let's save it and click on here to run Python file. Now let's click on here, drag and drop, and now let's click on here to follow link. Okay, so that you can see the UI. Okay, so you can see here our research assistant, how it look like. Okay, powered by Groq. So you need to give it to here and topics, I mean, and research topic. Okay, so now let's try to see on here, I mean, how it's basically built it and how it is basically running. I am simply going to closing this out first. Okay, so the same thing, you can see the same import that we actually done. Just we actually import here the Flux, the request, and the random template. So random template is basically for rendering the template from the template folder, and the request is basically for taking the input from the index.html file to our server file, I mean main.py file, and then we basically loading here our .env file from here, and then you have our app. You basically creating here an app. So app is equal to Flux and underscore name, and then you have our ask Groq method. You can see on here llama 3.3 70 million versatile it will be. So it should be this llama 3.3 17 million versatile. So okay, or you can also give it to here Mistral this model. You can give it to here. Okay, I think this model is not available. Maybe you can give it to here. You can see check on the Groq API section. Okay, and then you can see our the generate prompt, the initial report, the enhancement prompt, and you can see our route. Okay, that's our initial route actually. First, let's go on the index.html and let's see this out. Okay, so you're basically using here the tailwind CSS for the designing. So you can see title, you give it here AI research assistant, and then you have a from sections. You can see that. So the method is a post method itself, and you have an input box, and you give it here type as a text and name as a topic. So using this name, we can basically access it from the our main.py file. And the placeholder enter the research topic, and we have a button you can see on here. So when the user basically clicking this button, and the method is basically called. Now, if we got any kind of error, it will show the error message. So if the report is still coming, then we're simply going to show here the introductions, the background, the current state, the key finding, the case studies, the future directions, and the reference, everything on here. Okay. First, let's try to see this our code, and after that, you're simply going to go on here the index.html file. Okay. Now, this is our initial route that you can see on here. Method is a get method and the post method. Now, we're creating here a method called def index, and then you have the two variable. One is the report, another one is errors. We just make it as a none. Now the request method is equal to post method, and then we simply taking it from the topics that you can see the same name. Okay, the topic that you can see, we give it here a name called topic, and then we simply going to access it and the topics, and then after that is simply going to checking here if the topic is provided or not for the validation purpose, and the Groq API key also. Okay, and then you're creating here an asyncio.new event loop because you're calling here the function for the two times, and then using here asyncio.set event loop, we pass it to here, and then you have the report equal to loop.run until complete, and then we basically give it to here generate topics report that you can see on here. Okay, and then you have the exceptions. You can see uh, the exceptions as e, and then you have the error. You just give it to here, and we simply render the templates. Let's see index.html. Okay, so you're passing the report as well as we passing here our error. Okay, that you can see on here. Okay, super simple, nothing fancy. Now let's start saving this out, and now let's try to go on here our index.html. Now when we basically finding the report, you can see find basically finding the report, and which one is enhance this topic. So in our topic we have some we have the word called introductions, we have our word called background, we have our word called current state, we have the word called key finding, case study, future directions, and the reference, so that we can show it line by line. You can see show it line by line that you can see. Okay, if the line that is steep but lower start with these introductions, then simply going to break with the line so that it look cool, right? Now let's try to go on here and try to run in these applications again, and try to yeah, it's still running, so let's close it and let run it again, and after that is simply going to testing this out. Okay, let's click on here to follow link. Okay, so same thing, that's our you can see, and enter research topic that's called AI research assistant. Now let's give here one research topic. So let's enter a research topic. Let's say application of machine learning in climate change predictions. Okay, so let's click on generate report, and let's wait for the output. Okay, so we got our output. You can see application of machine learning in climate change predictions. You can see the introductions. You can see climate change is a precising global issue, background and context, the schematic diagram of machine learning for climate change predictions, the current state of research and technology, that you can see downscaling. It's basically a reference, I hope so. Okay, you can see on here, figure 2, downscaling with CNNs. Okay, as well as you can see that some of the references, you can see references. Okay, that you can see on here. Okay, so this is how it basically work. Okay, you can see case study, predicting sea level rise, climate change impact on agriculture, extreme weather event predictions you can do on that. Okay, so climate change impact on agricultures, and then you can see the background and context, you can see on here. Okay, so climate change predictions involve the complex interactions between the atmospheric oceanic. Okay, also I see that the figure is not showing up, So your job is to show the figure. Okay, because I'm not going to go in do it here. It's your task to do that. Okay, I just give you the code. So to check the code and to show the figure. Okay, you can see that. Okay, so a simplified schematic diagram illustrated the machine learning workflow on climate sense. It just show the descriptions, but it not show the figure. So your job is to change the program like that so that it can also show the figures, right? That's your task and homework. Okay. So that's it for today now. I hope you enjoyed this full tutorial and make sure to subscribe to channels and share with your friends as well as hit the like button, right? Thank you and bye bye.